Hello there, and a very warm welcome to this new and fourth season of Raising the Roof. I'm Nick Atkin, and you're listening to the podcast that brings business leaders and industry experts together to unpick the hot topics in both housing, but much further afield as well. And I have to say, we are back with a bang, because we are kicking off season 4 with a guest who I've been trying to get on the podcast ever since we started 3 years ago. Today's guest is without any doubt whatsoever my customer service hero, Chris Pitt, Chief Exec of First Direct, who are based here in lovely Leeds. Chris is joining me. He's going to be sharing his tips and tricks on how to deliver a great customer experience, as well as the culture that sits behind that. And I think this conversation comes at a really crucial time. Not only are we in an ever-changing world of new technologies where customers expect seamless services, but also when customer satisfaction levels generally across most service areas are actually declining. But kicking that trend, I'm going to be honest, I've banked with First Direct for over 29 years. I had a child saver account when I started. And I have to say, in all of that time and all of those interactions, I've never had one negative experience. And I think that is why I consistently put First Direct on a pedestal of customer service excellence. But it's not only me who's a big fan. First Direct constantly feature as one of the top service providers in the UK. And even that hard-to-please money man, Martin Lewis, likes First Direct as well. So, Chris, thank you ever so much for joining us today, and welcome to Raising the Roof.
Brilliant, thanks very much, Nick. I've come all the way from Sturton, as you say, in Leeds. And before we start, I'd just like to say thank you very much for being a First Direct customer.
No, absolutely. The thanks are all mine, although it is funny because I mentioned how excited I am to get you on the podcast. But I am always amazed that a company which makes money out of holding other people's money, which in effect is what a bank does, can garner such strong customer sentiment, such as how I feel about First Direct. And I think that's because everyone I've come across in your business is so personable, and it feels like they're empowered to just get on and resolve any issue at all, no matter what it is that I raise. But more than that, it's how they make me feel. They make me feel good after every single conversation. It's personal, and it just feels special. It feels like I'm their special person to speak to on that particular day. And I've described it as First Direct. It's like you've sprinkled everybody with magic fairy dust, or you've done something anyway in terms of to get that real culture. So I suppose I've got to start with, what's the secret? How do you do it, especially over what is a huge organisation?
Yeah, I mean, it's wonderful to hear you talking about what FD people do every day for you. So that's genius. I think the thing I'd go back to, I mean, I'm a historian with my first degree. And
your first degree? We'll come back to that. We'll definitely come back to that.
And it's really important, I think, when I took this job 4 years ago, is you want to be building on the culture and the legacy, as you've alluded to, after 29 years of First Direct. You didn't want to be the fact that I'd happened to be sitting in a seat keeping it warm for someone else. Yeah. That it was all about me, or kind of what I thought, or what I was focused on or interested in. So one of the first things I did is I kind of reached out to people who'd been at FD when FD was launched. So the founding mothers and fathers of First Direct. So I talked to Jan Smith, who was actually the original marketing director at FD. It was a project called Project Rain Cloud, came out of Midland Bank.
Oh, right.
And I talked to the first kind of active CEO of FD. I say active CEO in as much as he wasn't the person who led the project, but he was the person who very shortly after its launch who became and ran First Direct. So Kevin Newman.
Right.
Lovely man. When he left, everybody cried. And he lives now in Santa Barbara, California, which is where I'm hoping all FD CEOs go to die.
Is that why you went to see him?
It was Zoom. We're on a bank budget here, Nick. And what he talked about So First Direct was famously born at a minute past midnight on the 30th of October 1989, when everybody banked in a branch. Everybody, usually people queued up at lunchtime from their office role and stood in a queue with a piece of paper which was their cheque and another piece of paper which was the kind of paying in slip to get a little stamp to say that money was in their account.
I remember it well.
Yeah, and a minute past midnight on that fateful day in October 1989, you could ring up someone in FD and move £10,000 from one account to another account just by asking them to do it. There was no paper flying around. So it was so revolutionary, not only in terms of the delivery of the service, which you've talked to, but actually of the construct and the challenge within a regulated industry like banking to deliver. So the mothers and fathers of First Direct were, absolutely groundbreaking in terms of their delivery. What Kevin talked about is that Midland Bank, which subsequently got bought by HSBC, had been a scale organisation. At one point, it had been the biggest bank in the world. And it had come away from having the market share that it historically had. So Midland Bank had set up the Project Ray Cloud to launch what subsequently called First Direct to actually generate a significant increase in its market share. That was the task. Right. And what Kevin talked about was it had a commercial challenge, but to deliver such a radical proposition in a world where everybody went to a branch, it needed to have super brilliant customer service, not just customer service which was good for financial services, but super brilliant for anyone and anywhere to actually attract people into it.
Yeah.
Because, you're talking about a trust industry where you actually couldn't see people. Talking about a trust industry where the big banks with like these huge monolithic was always talking about safety and trust, and actually there was nothing there. You were trusting yourself to as a voice on the end of the call.
Yeah.
And FD actually, commercially, especially in those first years, didn't deliver on the promise that it originally set up to do, but it absolutely delivered on that customer service.
Right.
And that culture and ethos has carried on across the years. And Kevin was delighted to hear that it was still carrying on, and that, as you say, the great metrics we get in terms of over the last 10 years we've been the number one customer service brand in the UK, beating all other type of categories. Large part because of the brilliance of the people in FD and that culture that's carried on. As you would say in Yorkshire, it's not to do with me. It's to do with the culture.
Yeah, but I suppose a leader in any business does, to some degree, set the tone for the culture. So again, how do you get that sense of belonging and pride that I experience as a customer from your colleagues in FD? So how do you maintain that momentum from those founding fathers and mothers that you reference? Great phrase, I love that. But how have you managed to maintain that? Whilst you've been at the helm.
So a terminology that we use and has always been used at FD is pioneering amazing service. So PAS is kind of like it's the centre, it's the heart, it's the purpose of First Direct, and it's kind of carried on throughout the whole 35 years. We celebrated our 35th birthday in 2024. Empathy as an underpin for that is key to that. You talked about empowerment, empowering people to solve people's problems, because banking is very, very, very boring. I say that having done 37 years in financial services. And you think about it, you just want it to work.
Yeah.
Now, and what we do at FD and the culture and the philosophy at First Direct is not about wrapping yourself around the standing orders, the direct debits, the process. It's actually about, as you talk to, the people that we're looking to support, like yourself. And what we're doing and what we do as human beings with financial services, we use it to power our lives.
Yeah.
To allow us to buy things, to save for things, to borrow for things that we want, to invest into our future. So it's not about the construct of the mechanic of FS, but it's about how do you wrap yourself around the problem that person is trying to solve for.
Right. Okay.
Be that paying Tesco or kind of investing in a fund or whatever it may be. That's what we imbue our people with, and we recruit people relative to that point about empathy who like talking to people. The vast majority of people who are in FD are the people answering the phones in terms of the way that our business is constructed. Even though 98% of our transactions are digital, the mechanic of our machine is people who answer the phones, and that desirousness to want to talk to people. I remember talking to a rep not so long ago in FD. We call FD people, not colleagues, and customer reps. And I remember talking to this lady and saying, I love coming in to talk to my customers, and to have that mutuality of respect. Adult to adult is another word that's been used often in First Direct's history. And I've just like to think that I've continued that with my team and with the people of First Direct. Genuinely, if it was about me or if it was about an individual, that would set the wrong tone relative to the culture and history of First Direct. You know? We are a we-us business rather than an I-me business.
Yeah. Okay. Great. And you talked about your people that answer the phones, but the other thing that you've done really successfully, and I have to say, we have looked at what you've done and not copied that, but we've certainly taken some of the elements of it. But that's your online tone of voice. Mm-hmm. So I love the sort of the digital offering and just how plain talking it is. But again, you're a marketeer by background. Mm-hmm. I know, and I've done a little bit of research on you. And but I suppose how do you get that tone of voice again to replicate and mirror what your people are doing on the phones? Because very often they're two different parts of a business, aren't they? And sometimes the two can feel quite disjointed. So again, any tips or tricks you've got for our listeners on that?
Well, so the connection really is through our values. I mean, our values are not some sort of 6-point chart that nobody can remember. So our values are we stand together, bring a smile, we give a monkeys. We say it in a slightly punchier phraseology internally. And make things better. Yeah. So they're our values. Yeah. And it's the bring a smile one, really, which kind of underpins our tone. Yeah. I said banking is boring, and it is, but it has a toxicity in as much as it's also boring, complicated, and important. So we like to say that we don't take ourselves seriously, but we do take what our promise is to the people who bank with us. So we recognise that lots of the things that we talk about with our customers, if they have a vulnerability in terms of supporting them, we've got 90 people in the customer care team, we've got money mentors for people who might be coming under financial strain. There's a seriousness to what we do, but it doesn't need to play out in kind of how we behave. We don't wear suits, we don't wear business dress. My colleagues from HSBC, sometimes when they come to see us, they're kind of like it's a completely different cultural experience. So the other day we had some senior managers up from the UK bank who are ultimately my bosses, and we have a ball fight. So every now and then people stay on the call, but everybody who isn't on a call, everybody gets about 5 soft balls each, and we basically chuck them at each other for 2 minutes. A lot of them come my way, I must admit.
Yeah, I can imagine,
2 minutes is a long time when you're throwing a ball. At Christmas, we got the kids out of the nursery. We've got on-site nurseries at both of our sites. Again, talking to what matters to the people of First Direct, to allow them to bring their children and look after their children while they're working. We got the little ones out of the nursery, and I kind of did a switch on of the light for the Christmas tree with the kids singing. But we got some alpacas in, house trained alpacas.
I was going to check that. Yeah,
to add as proxies to reindeer. So my boss asked me, why alpacas? I said, well, reindeer bite. We couldn't get llamas on both of our sites because we've got a site in Hamilton as well. Apparently, alpacas was the lowest common denominator, so we had some alpacas in. But it's that sense of, just that kind of bring a smile. Tonally, it needs to play out throughout the organisation. You can't just be fun for the odd night out. You need to be fun in the right way and be serious when it's appropriate.
Yeah. And I absolutely get the read across. I think there's a huge amount of synergy between banking and being a landlord like Yorkshire Housing is, in that we're boring, but we're important for people because we're providing, an opportunity for them to your best memories are made in your home, aren't Absolutely. They? And we provide homes. We don't provide houses or units, as some people call them. So there is some similar read across. I think certainly for us, one of the things that we look to First Direct for is some of that learning. And I know you've achieved all of what you've described there without having a dedicated customer experience team. And I know in other service sectors and indeed some other banks, they have these dedicated teams. So again, just to help some of our listeners who might be sort of contemplating, well, actually, which route do we go down? What was the thinking for you around not having a dedicated customer experience team?
Yeah, it comes back to the point I made about history talking to Kevin, is it was everybody's responsibility to deliver brilliant customer service. It's not mine alone. It's not the reps alone. We need to give them the support. We need to give them the empowerment to be able to deliver that service. But it plays back to the point around culture. People in FD do, I would expect them to, and we strive to always do the right thing.
Yeah.
Just do the right thing. Examples of when, for whatever reason, our debit card might not be working for a customer. I've had reps on exchanges. Exchanges are where we connect with across our team, and you can basically say anything to make it better.
Okay. Yeah.
Who told me at the time, there was a lady in Morrison's, she was looking to pay for food shopping, didn't work, debit card, so the rep paid for her food shopping and then claimed it back.
Yeah.
A real hypocritical story within FD is of a Brit in Manhattan in 9/11. He rang First Direct. Why?
Yeah.
Because he knew we'd answer the phone.
Yeah.
And he knew that person would be kind to him and would help him. And what that rep did, is a very famous story within FD, that rep actually got hold of the emergency services within Manhattan and got someone to him to help him.
Wow. So he rang FD, not the emergency services to wow. So you are the fourth emergency service then, officially now, Chris. So I want to also just, again, in terms of that read across between banking and housing, I know that First Direct, as you mentioned, sits under the HSBC umbrella, and my understanding is, given that one of your former colleagues now works for us at Yorkshire Housing, is that you operate in an even stricter regulated sector than we do in housing, and we think ours is quite strict. And I suppose we feel a little bit like First Direct, a bit of an outlier in that regulated world in terms of a wider umbrella, but in a good way. So again, just how do you manage to stay ahead of others? You mentioned about the last 10 years and the fact that you've been voted by the general public as the best customer service provider. But how do you do that in such a heavily regulated industry? And also, how do you deal with the regulator when you don't conform to some of those regulatory norms that perhaps some of your peers have in place?
This is a podcast going out to the public, isn't it?
It is. Don't worry. No regulators listen to this. No regulators listen at all, Chris.
And I come back to being, my role as a CEO. In a commercial organisation like mine, you've got to make sure you deliver to your core promise.
Right.
So, I have a promise around the commercials of my organisation. I have a promise around the customer metrics we've talked a lot about, but I also have a promise around risk. No one wants to bank with a bank who may or may not look after their money properly.
Yeah.
And no one would bank with a bank in the same way you wouldn't eat in a restaurant that had been closed down or had been threatened by the environmental health, which had kind of regulatory issues around it. We strive to be the best that we can be and the best in the industry relative to the management of our risks, completely aligned to what the regulator wants.
Right. Okay.
Again, it's you just can't operate. It gives you credibility to operate. I wouldn't get any support from the people who I work for, the management team that I work for, if I wasn't delivering on the commerciality, my customer, and my risk metrics.
Right. Yeah.
So, and it comes back to that point around, bring a smile. You're serious, but you're serious when you need to be.
Yeah.
If you have a fraud, you don't want to ring up and have some sort of jaunty conversation with someone about, what did you have for your breakfast? Yeah. You want someone to help you out.
Absolutely.
You're absolutely. If you're locked out of your app and you need to transact and you're overseas, you need someone to sort that out for you.
Yeah.
If you ring up FD, 70% of that conversation will be held within that first point of contact resolution. That rep will sort you out.
Right. Yeah.
It's very important. We're not handing off. We don't have lots of specialised departments. We do have some, but we look to empower our reps, train our reps to be able to answer the questions that matter to people and solve them.
And that's certainly been my experience as a customer. There are very few times that I've been referred on to somebody else, and quite often I'm quite surprised just how knowledgeable the person is that I'm speaking to, but also across a wide range of issues, but also just the fact that, as I mentioned, I think at the top of the show, that they are empowered. They just are able to just go, yes, we can do that. I'll sort that, and you know, that's job done. Because it is a hygiene factor, isn't it? You know, it's like a landlord service. It's the same thing. People just want you to do stuff when they need you to do it, and the rest of the time, get out of their way, really.
But your challenge is to the kind of like, how do you operate within a regulatory environment and also be consumer centric? Is if you listen to yourself when you don't do the right thing for a customer by saying, well, the regulator wouldn't, you just sound such a lemon.
Yeah.
It's that kind of centre of gravity of doing the right thing for the punter, pioneering amazing customer service. You know, if the people who'd launched, I mean, I don't know this explicitly, but it's kind of intuitively right. If the people who launched First Direct had just operated within the regulation, they wouldn't have launched a telephone bank.
Yeah.
Because you needed bits of paper flying around. And they kind of sought to eradicate that need as part of delivering brilliant customer service 24/7, 365. So it's how do you use a kind of like the power and energy of doing the right thing to actually kind of influence, change, reflect, in the same way that I think in my experience in business, the best people are the ones who remain inquisitive, regardless of their experience or their environment. They're continually thinking about, how do I make this better? And that's what we try to do. Is we don't, like the regulator says no. We think, well, actually, if you think about it this way, could we do it slightly differently and still not be outside an outlier relative to risk, but delivering a much better customer experience?
Yeah. Okay. In terms of moving on to outside banking, I know you've got a couple of interests. I know you've been on the board of Shelter, which obviously does have a foot in the housing world. Just any reflections really on what you've seen, experienced there, and anything that's helped you to think about in terms of how the banking offer, for example, could be enhanced for more vulnerable groups of people in our society at the moment.
Yes, I'm a trustee of Shelter, and I've been doing it for about 10 months. I think I can get a lot better at helping in that space. So I wouldn't claim to be an expert. When I go to the board meetings, I think it's one for me personally, but also bringing back into my organisation, because I mean HSBC and First Direct, we actually are sponsors. We support. That's one. Our charity partner is Shelter as well.
Right.
But it's bringing back that kind of alternative perspective relative to people who are more vulnerable in society, who might actually not even bank with us and might not pass some of the credit scoring things that we do. It's bringing back that perspective into think about how we can get better to serve both our customers, but also the people of First Direct. So that sense of, you know, the diversity of thought, I think also, Ben, again, relative to the reasons we do partner with Shelter, is clearly a very important thing for the people of HSBC and the people of FD, is how do we bring what HSBC is really good at and apply that to support an organisation like Shelter.
Yeah.
You know, be that digital expertise, marketing expertise, how to run a call centre, for instance. So we've done some work with Shelter's call centre, which is actually based in Sheffield,
right.
From FD. And I know it really empowers, it's exciting and motivating for the people within First Direct to be able to do something so 100% positive and the right thing to do, come back to culture. And I know from talking to the guys in Shelter that they've been really excited to work with a business which has been running call centres for 35 years and, you know, has a pretty good handle on how to do it. So how do you bring the good things and the great things that a commercial organisation can do to help and support in an environment like that?
Right, okay. Yeah, I think you alluded to it in what you said there, but I think you also provide banking options or banking facilities for people who are, as you say, wouldn't normally pass your credit score or may find themselves homeless. Is that right? Just again, people might not be aware of that listening to this, so I just wondered if you wanted to just give a quick overview of that.
Yeah, so HSBC, and again, I encountered this more directly when I was doing my job as the Chief Marketing Officer of HSBC in the UK, offer an account called the No Fixed Abode current account. So if you're actually on the streets, you can use with Shelter that address as a kind of an address to utilise for actually getting banking. And we've offered that to quite a significant number of people who are homeless and on the streets.
And I think that's really important because for the majority of people in this country, the research shows you're only 3 paychecks away from from basically being homeless. I think that's a really sort of powerful thing that you offer. But also, we know that the way that the benefits system has moved, it's incredibly difficult now to operate using cash with that. So it's great that you're doing that. And certainly, if for anybody who's listening to the podcast, what we'll do is we'll stick a link to that within the narrative on this. So one of the other things, though, externally that you're doing, Chris, I know you've also recently joined the board of the Institute of Customer Service. And we had Jo Corson, I think, on season 1, and she's fantastic. And we've continued to have lots and lots of great conversations with Jo. And in fact, we're doing quite a bit of work with the ICS as well. But I know that one of their recent reports showed that customer satisfaction levels are at their lowest levels since 2010. So, 15 years, and that's the lowest level. And interestingly, when customers were asked for the top 3 things an organisation should do, the top response was make it easier to contact the right person to help me, which is probably part of the secret of your success in terms of, for the last 10 years, being voted the best customer service provider. I'm interested, though, in terms of what's your take on what's behind that decline in customer service, and what can we do to reverse that trend?
Yes, it's a tough one. I was actually at the launch of the ICS latest report actually a couple of weeks ago with the CEO of Sainsbury, and we got asked kind of a similar sort of question. I think there's a lot about, and it's always with research, is the expectation of people, I think, is significantly higher. In our industry, the fintechs have raised people's expectations as to what intuitive, simple delivery is, and they've made everybody run a bit faster and harder in terms of delivering on that. So what you define as simple and easy is changing all the time, and history would suggest more rapidly than ever. That's a big part of it. So what you would have said was okay, yesterday, is not necessarily going to be the same tomorrow. Yeah. And you think about it in our industry relative to moving money. When we launched in 1989, it was ringing up. That was a lot easier than queuing up in a branch. Now you can do it, sitting having a brew. Yeah. So it's moving all the time. Yeah. Yeah. So I think that is part of it. I don't become despondent by that. I think of it as catalytic, relative to kind of listening and hearing the kind of the reverse story. I mean, every Monday night I talk to a couple of punters of FD who've made a complaint and had issue with us. Oh, okay. Right. So I did it last night. It's brilliant at bringing to life the kind of like the metrics you might see on a paper relative to the real issues that you're not solving for people and what the impact is on them. Yeah. And bringing that back into the organisation. Yeah. And it's not this, just because I hear that story doesn't mean we kind of overpower anything else that was ever happening. If you complain, we will look to sort you out regardless. But it does make you think harder and better about your business. Yeah. Over the course of Christmas, I wrote a kind of like, I always write a little kind of thought piece as to if someone came and was a critique of what we were doing and what we were trying to achieve, what would they say? What would be the question that you wouldn't want to be asked? And what is the question you wouldn't want to be asked, Chris? Well, any complaints, one too many. So how do we bring the challenges of our business back into our business to make it better? How do we think even harder about our future customers and what their service delivery might be and need? We sometimes get lost in the channels in which we deliver rather than the thinking of the holistic proposition. Right. So those are the sorts of things. How do you look at what you do and say, that's all right, but you could be even better, and what can you get better at? Yeah. It comes back to that point about inquisitiveness I was making before. That is interesting. We went on a similar journey with complaints at this time last year, actually. And we took a whole group of our leadership team and got them really genuinely to walk in the customer's shoes, including some of my colleagues stayed overnight in one of our properties that we were, as if they'd just taken that tenancy and experienced how tricky it was in some cases to sort of get your life up and running in a new home. And for me, a new home should be one of the highlights of your life. It should be one of the most exciting points of life's experience. So again, really interesting to hear that sort of understanding the customer sentiment to that.
I want to just roll back to First Direct if I can. One of the other things that we've picked up as a bit of a theme, I'm going to pick two themes from season 3, but the first one was around digital transformation. Now, First Direct, of course, as you say, first phone bank, first internet bank, one of the first banks with a mobile app, but you've kept that in-person balance. So what advice would you give to a business that's on a digital transformation journey, and how do they keep it personal?
Yeah, don't get lost in the mechanic of what you're trying to do.
Right.
And I think you talked about it before.
Yeah.
You get someone who come in here and talk about AI. I mean, it's absolutely fascinating.
I'm coming to AI next,
Yeah.
funnily enough.
But it's a means to an end, not an end in itself.
Yeah.
We in our industry, and I think a lot of service industries get kind of lost in the kind of the mechanic. But actually, what's the outcome? What's the outcome you want to generate? The vast majority of our interaction is through the app, our app. But we deliver to customers through chatbots and kind of person-to-person chat, through telephony and through a desktop. People aren't internet banking customers or app customers, they're FD customers. And if they want to ring us up, it's got to be an observation of what matters to them. I think what matters to them is a much more powerful thing than what customer need. Because you think about what matters at any particular point in time, or kind of who you are and how you're made up. I had a very brilliant marketing leader who I work for talk about what matters.
Yeah.
And it's a much more pokier question to ask yourself. So when I was moving house, when I moved back to where I lived just south of Huddersfield, I knew that I could have moved that money in the app, but actually it was a big amount of money. It was a moving house day sort of thing.
Yeah.
So I rang up FD and got a rep to do it. Yeah. Completely kind of irrational in some way.
I've done exactly the same. Exactly the same.
Yeah. Because it was, I was feeling vulnerable, and it was a really important transaction to me, and I wanted to kind of talk to someone to do it rather than kind of do it through the digital channels. Yeah. Doesn't mean the digital channels weren't going to work.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's really kind of being inquisitive, as you talked about, to what matters to people at different points in time, and making sure you service their needs, and again testing it out. So sometimes organisations throw out new technologies in the kind of like service of delivery of something, and actually they know that it's going to they test it on the punter, and over the course of time it gets better. Is again, these things are a means to an end, not an end in themselves. And you do need people with the brilliant technical skills, like we've got at First Direct, to do that, but the culture needs to suggest to them why they're doing it, not get lost amongst the trees and consider it as a wood, really.
Right. Why they're doing a really, really powerful statement. So the second theme that came out of season 3 was indeed AI. And the theme last time was really that it was still when it was emerging. So it was the emerging impact of AI on our lives. I'm just interested, really, sort of, a few months on from season 3, what role do you think AI has in delivering a great customer experience? And what will that look like in, 6-12 months' time, given the exponential journey that AI is on?
I'm no expert in AI. I think you would probably gather that by now. But again, I'd come back to what matters to your punter and what matters to the business in delivering for the punter. So it's going to make things a lot easier for our reps, if you call us up, to actually get them to where they want to go. So it will supercharge that ability to actually make things easy and simple. Now, whether it's you talking to a rep who doesn't have to navigate kind of a number of systems to actually get to answer you, the fact that you can, your voice will have told that rep where they need to go. And therefore, they're kind of layering on advice or support or confidence, whatever it may be. I think digitally, it's going to have exactly the same impact relative to, looking at what you've done in the past and what you might want to do in the future. That kind of the materiality of that, again, get you there quicker. Yeah. But it comes back to what matters at a fundamental level. And then I'm always reminded, and this is where I kind of half answering your question, I think, is when in financial services, which I know a wee bit more about, when digitisation first came in, we were digitising what people did before digital.
Yeah.
But now digital invents new things that we can do for people. Yeah. So you think about the apps that allow you to give you predictions to what your outstanding or your amount of money you will have at month end based around your historical data. You never got that in branch banking.
Yeah.
So that you invent services because of the data and because of the actual channel and the technology itself. So you will invent things to solve problems for people and make their lives better, which are not just making it faster and quicker the things that happen today. I say I know nothing about AI, but I'm pretty 100% sure that will be true in all our industries, be that financial services, wherever it may be. It will create new services for us that we can't even envisage that we need at the moment.
Right. So it very much acts as an enabler. As you said, it works to drive an even better customer experience, but it makes life easier for your FD reps to be able to provide the service that people want.
Yeah, I mean, what matters in financial services, 95% it just works.
Yeah.
I mean, less and less now. Is it you petrol or diesel in your car, you go to the kiosk and your debit card doesn't work.
Yeah.
Right? It's just got to work. There's no way you're recommending or engaging something that just don't work. In terms of value exchange, the price of a loan, mortgages especially, who wants to be paying more over the odds than for 25 years or whatever it may be. Reward my loyalty. You've been with us 29 years.
Yeah.
You expect something back. And often when I talk to customers on a Monday night, I often get into that sort of construct around, the reward for my loyalty. And I think it's absolutely something that businesses need to lean into.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then in our industry, it's about trust. And post 2008, there's lots of soul searching relative to the trust within financial services more generally as an industry. But it breaks down into two in the research that I've seen and done, which is about emotional trust and rational trust. Nobody would disagree. I think maybe the odd one or two that banks don't deliver rational trust. Then no one thinks that an organisation is going to not pay their mortgage or take their money out of their account. But emotional trust, that you're on my side, that you care about me.
Right, okay, right.
That you're looking out for me.
Yeah.
And FD as a business has evidenced that, I'm doing the right thing for you, not the right thing for the bank in terms of our commerciality.
Yeah.
And that's the really important part of our culture and our ethos, is that you do the right thing. We have very loyal customers at First Direct. We've actually got very loyal people as well because of that culture which is pervaded for so many years.
Yeah, and I think that is one of the things that really marks you out from others. I like everybody else, I have a lot of customer service interactions with a lot of businesses, and I'm always amazed how many work really hard to attract me as a new customer, but make no effort. In fact, if anything, offer me a worse deal to stay with them rather than leave and go somewhere else. It's always one of those that I can never ever get my head around in terms of the logic of what their thinking is. So it's great to hear that. Looking ahead then to the future, what's the next big thing for First Direct?
I mean, I've been in FS for 37 years, as I mentioned, and can't really point out. I mean, there's the odd one or two, but there's no. We're still borrowing and paying back money in exactly the same we did when I started at the TSB in 1988. So it's about incrementalism, I think,
right?
In terms of in service of what matters. So for me, we build our kind of matrix of kind of delivery around growth, management of our customer service, and management of how do we deliver for our people.
Right.
And I'm really excited. I think we've post COVID, as we brought people back into the office, we've got a much better connection now in our offices, back with our people.
Yeah.
Absolutely want to do the right thing relative to giving that flexibility, especially for mums, and often it's women who are caring for their parents as well as children or grandchildren. So we need to provide that flexibility, but creating that sense. So more about how do we get even greater connection with our people. Yeah. We got some momentum with our 35th birthday celebrations and also into Christmas this year. I was wandering around dressed up as a turkey, handing out chocolate to people. You can stick that picture on the website. I think I'm really excited about what we're going to do about rewarding loyalty, and hopefully, Nick, you'll see that about how do we focus down on rewarding the loyalty of our customers in a very tangible way. And then it's real incrementalism driven by, probably by AI as well, about how do we make it even simpler and easier, and how do we constantly challenge ourselves to eradicate the need to do something you don't want to do. So in 2024, we significantly changed the digital security, which actually means that we took out an awful lot of unnecessary calls into our business where people didn't want to call up to reset passwords and the like. They could do it themselves.
Yeah.
And that is...
I was one of them.
and it sounds kind of quite dull.
Yeah.
But it's so material to what matters to people relative to how they bank.
Yeah.
You know, you just think of that kind of cold, sweaty feeling when you kind of want to log onto your app and it actually won't register.
Yeah.
It's so fundamental to your life. So making that better, so fundamental improvements as well as improvements on the margin relative to the kind of the more first world things you do, I suppose, as well.
Yeah. You certainly do offer a frictionless service, and I can say that, you know, hand on heart, and I say that very publicly when you're not in the room as well. So, last one for me before I sort of flip it over to you. You are a long-standing disruptor. You're a bit like me. You've probably never really found a safe home until you are where you are now, and I'm probably the same with Yorkshire. So, what advice would you give to anybody listening in terms of how you deal with the naysayers? You know, the ones that say, that'll never work, you know, we've tried it before, it didn't work last time. Not in a Yorkshire accent, of course, but what one thing or what one bit of advice would you give to people who come across those naysayers?
Yeah, I could do it in suburban Cockney if you like.
No, let's do it. You do suburban Cockney, I'll do full Yorkshire.
Or just don't hang around with the miseries.
Yeah.
People who are kind of mood hoovers.
Yeah, we have that phrase.
Don't hang around with them. And it's, you know, some people say, I got this email from such and they've said such and such. I said, and they're kind of, and I've done this before. I said, that person, did you think they were ever going to send you an email which was going to be cheerful? And they said, well, no. I said, well, why did you open it and read in it then? Because you just kind of made yourself miserable.
Yeah.
I said, I just deleted it. I looked at who sent it to me and just deleted it.
I wondered why you never read my emails.
I've just got auto-delete on you. But it comes back to that point around the reflection point. What are we doing here in a commercial, in my way, commercial life? I've got a promise to the shareholder in HSBC. I've got a promise to my customer, and I've got a promise to my people. And it's kind of underpinned by kind of running the organisation, so the regulatory dynamic, which is kind of another stakeholder. And I've got to make those things better. And so how do I make those things better? And who do I need to engage to make those things better? And holding that kind of principle to what you do, you then kind of just focused on the outcomes that means you can do that. You know, if we were in crisis and we needed to achieve something, we wouldn't kind of schedule a meeting and kind of go and ask 12 people. You know, you just go on and do it.
Yeah.
So creating that momentum and energy to do those things, you know, and not getting kind of lost in the periphery.
Right.
I'm a great believer in you've got to behave properly as well. You know, I like working for HSBC because, and I've done it 3 times because, you know, we have a good standard of behaviour.
Yeah.
So it's not about being rude or kind of deliberately ignoring people, you know, or you know, you don't need to be crushingly centralist relative to your own theory or egotistical to do that. But you just need to be honest relative to what we're trying to achieve. We're all trying to achieve this. Do we all agree? Right, let's go and do that. So when someone comes and says to you, why don't we do this? You said, did you not quite hear that we were just going to go over there? And you just, you know, you use that as a momentum to do things. Yeah,
that's great. Chris, we've reached my promise to you was that I'd give you an opportunity to flip the mic. So we have reached that part of the episode where we give you the chance to ask me some searching questions. So rather nervously, I'm going to flip the mic and it's over to you.
Brilliant, great, excellent. So I've got 2 questions for you. What is your proudest moment?
I think, it sounds a bit twee, but I think my proudest moment is being a parent. Now, people who work alongside me know that I moan about my 3 kids quite often. But I think there are those times when your kiddywinkles do some lovely things that make you realise you've done an okay job as a parent bringing them up and getting them to be well-rounded human beings, but also getting them ready for what the world has to offer, all the fab exciting stuff that life brings, but also getting them ready to weather the odd storm that occasionally comes their way. So I think, you know, I've had, and it has been quite recently, you know, we've had some difficult family news, and I think the way that my 3 children have responded to that, they're grown up, but has really made me step back and go, wow, right, okay, that wasn't what I was expecting, but in a good way. And I think that's when you do look across at Catherine, my long-suffering wife, and we go, you know what? Yeah, we've done an okay job with those three, and we've got them ready for the world ahead. So, for me, I think that's probably one of the most important things in life, and I think that's, for me, that's probably my proudest moment.
Lovely to hear. Lovely to hear. And then my second probing question is: if you had one wish, what would it be and why?
Really simple. It's independence for Yorkshire. No, definitely not saying that. Joking aside, I think, you know what, I'd like to see people be more kinder to each other. I think it comes back to the ICS research. It shows that a lot of people in customer service roles are suffering high levels of abuse and in completely inappropriate behaviour from people. And it does feel like we're in quite an adversarial time. And it also seems to be compounded by what feels like an army of keyboard warriors who are, happy to tap away and say things online that they'd never dream of saying in person. They'd never sit where you are now and say some of the things that they do. So, for me, I think just people to be a little bit kinder to each other. I thought we went through a pivotal moment during lockdown. I thought, that might be the sort of cultural shift for society, but I do feel like we've regressed back, and in fact possibly slipped back even further. But my one beacon of hope on that is that I saw just last week that kindness was the one word that had been voted by a large group of young people as their word of the year for 2025. So it's also my word of the year for 2025, and it's my wish for 2025 as well.
Very good. Well, fantastic answers. It seems as though you said kindness as the response to both of those, so I'm very impressed.
Yeah, maybe there's something in that. It's back to me. Just some quick fire questions to leave our listeners with a few final thoughts. And I have to say, what's the best customer experience you've ever had? And it can't be First Direct, okay? So best customer experience you've ever had.
Yeah, so outside an FD person. So it's something I observed, actually. So when I worked for Tesco Bank, I lived in Edinburgh, and I, like a muppet, managed to pop a tyre on my car on the day before kind of Christmas, and I had kind of those temporary.
I have nightmares about things
wheel,
like that.
With those kind of like temporary things that's kind of like.
Yeah.
So I had to seek out just after Christmas a kind of an auto repair place to get a new tyre fitted because we were driving back to my wife's family, and I went to Farmer Auto Care. So if you live in Edinburgh, Farmer Auto Care.
Great plug for them.
Tom Farmer. I think I'm right in saying he was the guy who originally set up Quick Fit.
Oh, right.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I've heard him speak, actually. He's a very impressive man. And no shops were open, but we managed to find that Farmer Auto Care was open. And I watched this guy. I got a new tyre for me, but I was watching, as you sit in those little places, in those kind of exhaust and tyre places. And there was two guys on. And the people in those places, they're kind of raw human beings, aren't they? Kind of like they, to survive and operate in those sorts of places.
Gig.
Yeah, absolutely. And this lady came in, and she had an issue with a car, and she didn't know what it was. I know nothing about cars. So it's not to do with the fact that she was a woman. She didn't know anything about cars, and she would have said exactly the sort of things I would have said, which it's kind of not working. I'm not kind of sure why. And this guy said, "No problem. Let me have a look at it." And he went away, and he spent quite a lot of time on it. I was in there a little bit of a while, and he came back and he gave her the keys, and she said, "How much do we owe you?" And he said, "Nothing."
Yeah.
And when she left, she was so happy and delighted because she was trying to get away for some of Christmas.
Yeah.
I said to him, did you have to do anything for that car? He said, "Yeah, quite a lot." He said, "But I got a note from my boss today," and he said, "Today is not a day to make money. It's the day to make sure you get people there safely."
Wow.
And for that to operate across a relatively big business, and to actually impact people who kind of in terms of kind of the very nature of their operating environment, to have that kind of subtlety and foresight and care, I thought was absolutely genius.
Oh, great. That's a great example. My final quickfire question. there's lots of ways that and lots of styles for the leader, the chief exec of any organisation. You seem to be doing a pretty good job of it. So, in a few words, what advice would you give to any aspiring chief execs?
It's always a matter of opinion, Nick. I mean, I try to be the person I'd like to work for. You know, I'm sure, like all of us, if you get to a certain age, you've encountered quite a lot of different styles of management, and one not passing on poor management styles onto other people. And the one thing that I've kind of picked up, I mean, in lots of management, and I'm not a great reader of management books. I've read a few during lockdown, but there's a guy called Daniel Pink who wrote a book called Drive, and that's got a model for kind of people motivation around mastery, autonomy, and purpose. So you give people a very clear purpose. So they don't need to check in. I don't need to keep coming back to you and say, I work for you. What am I doing next? Say, well, we know what we're trying to achieve, don't we? Mastery, the idea that you know, and this is, I think it's intuitive amongst most human beings. You want to get better. And then autonomy, which is, I think, essential. You know, who likes someone hanging over their shoulder? Who likes someone saying you should have dotted that I across that T? You know, and so that as a model. I actually talked to a new team I'm setting up about the culture that we create. And in fact, after it, someone came to me and said, I've got this decision. Do I need to do this or this? So I said to them, well, what do you think? And they said, well, I think we should do this. I said, well, let's do that then. And it is actually such an easier way to manage as well, because what you're doing is you galvanising and unleashing the power of your people rather than them just being a function of what you tell them what to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Sadly, Chris, it's time to close the door on this first episode of Season 4 of Raising the Roof. And what a great way to kick things off. A massive thank you to you for joining us, but particularly for sharing such rich insights into delivering a great customer experience. And, you know, I can think of nobody better than you to sort of talk about that. But also a big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in. We're just getting started in this new season, so don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next episode, but also so that you can catch up on the previous 3 seasons. But it's a wrap, so catch up next time. Bye for now.